Stream every episode on ABC iView. This program contains coarse language and sexual references.
Today, a flood emergency warning issued for Tasmania's River Derwent. Residents urged to monitor conditions and be prepared to leave.
The worst is to come in terms of flooding.
Israeli military recover the bodies of 6 hostages taken by Hamas from tunnels in Gaza. From world records to gold medals, Australia continues to shine on day 3 of the Paris Paralympics. And wins for Alex de Minaur and Jordan Thompson sets up an all-Australian 4th round blockbuster at the US Open. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. Wild weather is expected to wreak havoc across Tasmania and southern Victoria through this evening. Destructive winds and major flooding is feared as another cold front moves across the area. We begin our coverage this hour in Tasmania, where we're joined by reporter Lucy McDonald, who's in Deloraine, west of Launceston. What is the situation there, Lucy?
Well, Lorna, in Deloraine, we can really feel the wind picking up at the moment. The river behind me, Meander River, is, you can see it's high, but we understand it is obviously going to get higher throughout the night. Now, this is the same river that, while there are only sort of mild to moderate flood warnings for this area in Deloraine, the Meander runs, through a lot more towns, and we're seeing that there is, potential major flooding warnings there. But, it's really sort of the destructive winds that have caused the most damage, and it's mostly downed power lines. But we did hear from the Emergency Services Minister earlier, who said there's sort of significant damage across the state to things like power lines and trees and sort of other infrastructure. They mentioned something about schools, so we're talking about whether or not we'll even see some schools closed tomorrow. Then, of course, as we know, the really more severe weather at the moment is in the Derwent Valley, which is about 40 minutes sort of from Hobart down in the south, where obviously you've got that emergency flood warning where people are being sort of urged to be prepared to leave. Basically, if anything gets any worse, they need their kits there, and they need to be constantly monitoring sort of TAS alerts and ABC radio and things like that.
Hundreds of calls to SES for assistance. We heard from the Premier. Is there any assistance for residents that might be affected by this bad weather?
Yes, there is at the moment. So we've actually, initially the SES have been out sort of in droves, knocking on people's doors, again, mostly sort of in the south, to make sure they're aware of that there is like there are these flood warnings and at the moment, and telling them to get prepared. Now, we understand that obviously in terms of if people have to leave their homes, there's emergency sort of assistance for food, and the other sort of assistance that's around at the moment is, SES are obviously cleaning up as much as they can, and we've also got TAS networks, because there is, I think it was like 30,000 or 34,000 homes without power at the moment. Now they're around the place trying to restore power, but obviously it's not always safe to do so. In fact, here's what Premier said early.
Bearing in mind, these are very dangerous conditions for our linesmen and women as they work through reconnecting, and so as soon as possible. And we're also in very close contact quite clearly with Telstra as well, particularly around ensuring that we have maximum coverage when it comes to 000, for example, and there are some outages there, which is very concerning, and I will understand and appreciate that, but again, very close contact with Telstra in terms of reconnecting that 000 services and phone lines.
So at the moment, obviously, while they are trying to sort of do things like restore power and clean up things, we know the worst of it is possibly yet to come. So we're going to see more power outages and more damage over the next few days. So people just need to stay vigilant.
Lucy, thank you. Well, it's a pretty similar situation further north. Victoria Emergency Services there are warning communities to brace for this severe weather. Destructive winds are continuing to batter the state. In fact, over the past 6 days, the SES has received more than 3,000 requests for help. Around 600 homes have been damaged and more than 35,000 homes left without power over that period. Well, Emergency Services and the Bureau of Meteorology gave an update a short time ago, basically saying that it is likely the continuing strong winds will result in more power outages and road closures.
Tonight and early tomorrow morning we are going to see more severe weather across the state of Victoria. Again, this will include damaging and locally destructive winds, isolated thunderstorms and again more high tides and damaging surf. It is likely that the destructive and damaging winds are going to result in a lot more trees down, more houses without power, building damage, road closures and possibly possibly impacts on the transport networks rather. So in terms of our community messaging, please avoid unnecessary travel during this period, particularly in areas where there are significant amounts of trees. Understand the risks of where you live and where you work. If you live in an area that has a significant amount of trees or trees nearby, understand those risks and have a plan. Decide whether or not the risks are too great for you to stay in the home and you should seek shelter elsewhere with family or friends, or what else you should do to avoid the risk. Don't be driving out through these conditions. Plan for power outages. It is almost certain that we will result in more power outages. Plan for up to 72 hours. Charge your mobile phones, have access to a radio, have access to a torch.
At the moment, we do have a severe weather warning out for damaging and locally destructive winds for large parts of southern and mountain Victoria. That does also include the Melbourne area. So in terms of how things will evolve over the next 6 to 12 hours later tonight, we're going to see that strong cold front approach the southwest coast. And in that region, we are going to potentially see wind gusts up to 130 kilometres an hour. Then into the early hours of Monday, we're going to see that front moving into central Victoria, including the Melbourne area. So first impacting the Geelong region around 1 a.m, wind gusts potentially around 120 kilometres an hour along the coast there. And then through the Melbourne region between about 2 and 4 a.m. So for much of Melbourne, we're looking at wind gusts in excess of 100 kilometres an hour. But the Mornington Peninsula, areas up towards Aspendale, southeast suburbs, could see those gusts up to 130 kilometres an hour. For the Macedon Ranges and Dandenong Ranges, we're looking at wind gusts of 110 to 120 kilometres an hour. And I just wanted to emphasise that it's that period between about 2 and 4 a.m. Monday that we're expecting those strongest winds in the Melbourne region as that front rips through the Melbourne area.
Well, that's the update from the Bureau of Meteorology. Let's give you an idea of where those areas are that he's talking about. You've got the situation in Tasmania there, but if you look at Victoria, it's all along that coast, basically from the South Australia border along, and there are now 4 watch and act severe weather warnings in place. They are, as we just heard, the Macedon Ranges, that's to the north west of Melbourne, the northeast ranges as well, that is at amber level, watch and act level. Then we go to the southwest coast as well. The problems there are with the very dangerous surf and the surges in water. And then we go into southeastern Melbourne, the suburbs there of the Mornington Peninsula there. So a huge swathe of Victoria that is likely to be impacted by this coming storm or cold front front that is pushing through later tonight and early into tomorrow morning. The period of concern for Melbourne being between 2 and 4 a.m. tomorrow. We'll keep across all of those. Listen to your local radio stations from the ABC, and they will be updated, as will ABC iView and the website, with all the information that you need. To other news then, and the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, arrives in WA today, with meetings taking place under the shadow of the recent death of a 17-year-old boy in the Banksia Hill Detention Centre. Politicians and advocates are calling for urgent federal intervention in WA's youth justice system. The boy's mother has told the ABC he faced many demons and would be deeply missed by his family, saying the system is failing all young people. Opposition Senator Andrew Bragg says questions on both gender identity and sexual orientation should be included in the next census. The Albanese government confirmed on Monday it would not add new questions on these topics, but has since backtracked and is now in favour of testing one question on sexual orientation. Andrew Bragg has told the ABC's Insiders programme it is important the next national survey records a person's gender identity as well as their sexual orientation.
Sexual orientation and gender identity are reasonable questions to ask in a modern society. I think the fact that the Prime Minister has tied himself in knots on this issue shows a great weakness in his own leadership. I mean, the Labor Party promised this at the last election, so I'm not surprised that the LGBT lobby is very disappointed and feels let down.
The Israeli military says the bodies of 6 hostages taken by Hamas militants last October have been recovered from a tunnel in the Rafah area in Gaza. It says they've now been returned to Israel. The 6 include Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who was among the best known of the hostages. His parents met with world leaders and addressed last month's Democratic Party convention in the US to press for help for his release. Well, a large-scale vaccination campaign is underway in Gaza and the West Bank, inoculating children against the polio virus. Children in the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis were some of the first to be vaccinated as part of an immunisation plan for 640,000 children. The vaccinations began ahead of 3 days and 8-hour daily pauses in fighting between Israel and Hamas in specific areas. The aid programme started as Gaza recorded one of its bloodiest days in recent months, including the deaths of 26 people killed in an Israeli bombardment overnight.
We are here for the bundling of the supplies and logistics needed for the vaccination teams and vaccination supervisors, and we will ensure the delivery of those needed supplies.
The Israeli military says it's killed 2 Palestinians in separate incidents involving suspected car bombs in the occupied West Bank. In one incident, soldiers shot dead the driver of a car who they say opened fire after his vehicle exploded at a petrol station. In the other, troops killed a Palestinian who'd driven his car at the entrance to an Israeli settlement. This week's Israeli military operation in parts of the occupied West Bank are some of the largest in months, with the scale of the operation drawing international calls for an extended halt in fighting. Now, it's one of our favourite holiday destinations. Almost 500,000 Australians visit Fiji every year. But these days, the island paradise is dealing with a very different kind of visitor. Mexican cartels and outlaw motorcycle gangs are using Fiji and the surrounding islands as transit points to import methamphetamine and cocaine into Australia. Now the drugs are seeping into local communities as well, with Fijian villages reporting children as young as 11 becoming addicted. The ABC's Fiji reporter Lithe Mavono is in Suva.
It's a long way from white sand, beaches and blue skies. This is the dark side of the islands.
Children they having injection here, this place, like especially at the back of the bus stop.
On the streets of Suva, Fiji's capital, the drug trade is thriving. Police say they're seeing it everywhere.
The police have now this big challenge of trying to maintain and to fight this new menace that is here with us, and that is the white drugs that come in.
And that fight starts here. It's the welcome most tourists expect when arriving in Fiji. But this one is a little different.
What do you see the dogs looking for?
Hard drugs, arms and ammunition, cash, and cannabis.
The team here at Nadi Airport do what they can. But with just 2 sniffer dogs covering the entire country, huge shipments are getting in with ease.
Just 5 minutes away from Fiji's gateway airport in Nadi, in this shed.
One of the biggest drug busts the world has ever seen took place. Police found 4.8 tons of methamphetamine,
with a street value of $2 billion.
Authorities say drug cartels are often using private yachts to transport shipments. From Mexico, they travel across the vast Pacific and use Fiji and neighboring islands Tonga and Samoa as transit points. The cartels use contacts in the Pacific as well as outlaw motorcycle gangs to distribute the drugs locally and onto the more lucrative Australian and New Zealand markets.
These guys are so organized that they'll do whatever it takes to achieve their mission. They've got unlimited resources. They've got their roots, they're well established. So this is something that, in my view, that we need to work together from all government stakeholders, because the social impact it's currently having on our society is so bad.
This problem of drugs is everywhere. It's everywhere. There's not enough boats to go around, which just means that the leaders need to work together.
On the ground in Fiji's communities and villages, the drug problem is spreading. Community leaders are now dealing with meth addiction and are regularly spotting drug paraphernalia.
We found a needle only 1 or 2 meters inside the village.
Like many village chiefs across Fiji, Manoa Ravovo says he's worried for the future.
Because drugs, they damage our mind for our children and never no future. That's why we protect our village from drugs.
A dark shadow cast over island paradise. Livia Movono, ABC News, Fiji.
A number of Australian farmers have raised concerns that a common herbicide may be the reason for a spate of Parkinson's cases. Paraquat is banned in nearly 70 countries due to its toxicity, but not here in Australia. Andy Burns has this report from ABC Regional Investigations.
David Jolliffe has been growing potatoes on this Newland property since the 1970s. For decades, he used farm chemicals to manage pests and weeds.
I can remember marking potatoes. We used to use the plane a bit, and the plane would fly over your head and loop around and go back.
He now has Parkinson's and believes the farm chemicals he used are linked.
There's 4 guys around here, and we all got it about the same time.
Among the chemicals David used was Paraquat, a broad-spectrum herbicide developed in the 1960s. It is now banned in 67 countries due to its toxicity, but Syngenta, the original manufacturer, continues to defend the product.
Paraquat is safe for farmers and growers to use.
US professor Deborah Corey-Slechta has conducted independent animal studies that show mice injected with Paraquat develop signs of Parkinson's. Syngenta has publicly criticised her work, but internal documents obtained by the ABC show the company's own scientists replicated her findings and hid them from the public.
So while they were trying to repudiate my studies, they in fact replicated them and found exactly the same thing.
In July, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority released its own report card on Paraquat. It found evidence linking Paraquat with Parkinson's was not robust. That conclusion was underpinned by another Syngenta-funded study, which was never externally peer-reviewed. A 2023 report into the Australian regulator found it was at serious risk of industry capture, but the chief executive has stood by its scientists.
All of the assessment teams I've met absolutely have the highest regard for the integrity of the work that they do.
In a statement, Syngenta said it strongly rejects insinuations about the lack of integrity of its science. Melbourne-based neurologist Wesley Thevatharson held a community presentation in August, warning farmers to avoid chemical exposure.
It's the degree of exposure that will be a crucial factor.
He says many of his Parkinson's patients have used pesticides, and that he can't understand how the regulator reached their decision.
Why, when faced with the same evidence as those other bodies, have they come to a completely different conclusion?
You can't unscramble an egg. Moving forward, you would hope that something's been done for it not to happen again.
The farmers in this community want to protect the next generation. Andy Burns, ABC News, Newlyn.
Millions of Oasis fans have endured hours of delays and, in many cases, disappointment as online platforms strained under the demand for tickets for the group's reunion tour in the UK and Ireland. The British band has also urged fans not to resell tickets after some were relisted for thousands of pounds.
Oasis, one of the biggest British bands of all time, often seen as the poster boys of the Britpop era. It's the day that many dreamed of, a chance to see Oasis live once more. But hundreds of people have been left feeling frustrated.
You would have thought that with today's technology and abilities that they could handle the amount of demand, but clearly they can't, and these, the websites and the apps just crash. But it's the lack of information, just guessing what's happened.
Fans have also been venting their anger at so-called in-demand pricing on Ticketmaster, which resulted in a hike to some prices. Ticketmaster says it does not set ticket prices. Meanwhile, tickets on resale websites were listed at inflated prices. Oasis said those tickets would be cancelled. Rachel from Devon said the only tickets you can buy are the vastly overinflated price ones with no perks, while Kate from Huddersfield said it's a nightmare, it's stressful and a waste of a Saturday morning. Here's one who got lucky, though.
So there's a big group of us that were all high school friends, massive Oasis fans, and we're all sat on a WhatsApp chat this morning. They've all got phones out, iPads out, laptops, refreshing like mad. And it was actually one of my friends who was on holiday in Spain managed to get the tickets in the end.
You might be struggling to understand why a band from the 90s has sent so many people into a frenzy. But Oasis was always about so much more than just the music. It's about the attitude, the swagger, and even the haircuts. More dates could still be added to the tour, so if you've not been lucky this time, there could be more chances later down the line.
Let's start the sports update with the tennis, because Alex de Minaur is through to the fourth round in the US Open, beating American Dan Evans in 4 sets in New York. The 10th seed Australian took the first set 6-4 but dropped the second set 7-6 before emphatically taking out the last 2 sets 6-love. It sets up a blockbuster clash with fellow countryman Jordan Thompson. He beat Italy's Matteo Arnaldi in straight sets.
Jordan Thompson back into the Sweet 16.
The 32nd ranked Australian defeated the 30th seed in straight sets, 7-5, 6-2, 7-6 to reach the round of 16. Earlier, though, Australia's Chris O'Connell went down to world number 1 Yannick Sinner in straight sets. It's been another massive day for Australia's para-athletes in Paris, with 5 medals won on day 3 of the competition, including gold medals in both table tennis and cycling. Our reporter Charles Bryce is there.
Australia reclaimed 2 more gold on day 3 in Paris. Lina Lei and Yang Chen
winning the doubles in the table tennis. They were in some great form going into the final. They hadn't dropped a set all tournament in the doubles, but they were, of course, up against some stiff competition from Taipei, who they too hadn't dropped a set on their road to the final. It was Australia that came out firing, winning the first two sets in pretty dominant form, 11-7 to 11-6. The first two sets. They came across a pretty big roadblock in the third set, though. Taipei putting up a really decent fight to claim that third set 11-3. And it looked as if Australia had a real struggle on their hands in the fourth set as well. The lead was going back and forth. Australia at one stage had a match point that couldn't capitalise on. They did regather and they eventually won in the fourth set 12-11 to claim Australia's first gold in table tennis. Another gold in track cycling went to Amanda Reid. She's the current world record holder in the C2 500 metre time trial. She dominated that race from the outset, claiming the fastest time in qualifying. She backed up that form in the final to win, and she has been in some spectacular form in recent time, not just in the lead up to Paris. She won the 500 metre time trial at the World Champs. So if you're looking at that form, it probably really does come as no surprise that she has claimed gold. There are some other medals around the grounds. Maddie Di Rosario, she claimed a bronze medal in the 5,000 metre wheelchair race. And going into the Paralympics this year, it wasn't necessarily a major focus for her. She is naturally a marathon racer, but her and her team decided that they would compete in the 5,000 metre. No doubt she'll be thanking her team that she did so.
I think to come away with that medal, it means a lot for that reason. It was a short turnaround to make that work. We were so close to not being on that start line today, and I'm so proud of that race for those reasons.
Michael Roger claimed silver in the 1,500 metre T46 race. He led for the majority of that race, but it was just within the last 80 metres or so that the lactic acid was really starting to take effect. His pace really slowing. He couldn't pull off the win. He claiming silver with being beaten by just 1 second. We've seen elation right throughout the 3 days of the Paralympics so far, but there has been some heartbreak for Jared Clifford, who was disqualified from his race. The vision impaired athlete running with his guide and dropping the tether just metres from the finish line. He came across the line in third place, leading for most of it, but of course was disqualified. He was looking to appeal that decision. The International Paralympic Committee saying there were no grounds to appeal, and naturally it left him very emotional, breaking down in tears with his family in the stands. He took to social media to say that he understood the rules and that this is all part of racing, but no doubt something to look back on in the years to come with some devastation. But of course, we look on to day 4.
You're watching ABC News. Those are the top stories.
This week on News Breakfast, we're live on the ground in Paris as Australia's Paralympic team continues its quest for more gold.